We are making our way through the book of Daniel. And today, Bob and Deb, you jumped into a cold pool, I'll tell you. Because, when we're nearing the end of the book, now, what I'll want to do is after chapter 12, I'll want to cover the story of Susanna, which is in the Greek version of the book of Daniel. The story is too cool. And we looked at Bel and the Dragon and a couple other ones, and we tied them into that helped us understand what was going on in the Hebrew/Aramaic text. But we'll do that later. We're not going to finish 11. I was hoping to, but it's so dense. There's so much stuff going on. And you guys are going to have to fight not to have your eyelids just crash, because what Daniel does, it's all prophecy, but it's loaded with history. And I could have made this into a couple lessons. I could have made just a lesson on how it ties into 1st and 2nd Maccabees. I mean, because they cover a lot of the same subject area. But we're studying Daniel, so I don't think I'm going to do that. But there is a whole lot of cool connections and whatnot. So we know Daniel, that he was brought over as a young man, right? But he was very sharp, and he was part of the kind of the Jewish nobility. And so the Babylonian Empire, they kind of did that. One, to weaken the country that they took their leadership from, but also to try to incorporate the best and brightest minds and fold them into their empire so it would be a well-functioning empire, as well as, getting everybody to kind of buy into their kind of what they're doing. And of course it didn't completely work, because the Persians ended up taking over. So now Daniel is an old man in his 80s, he's close to death, but God has given him some visions. And unlike the other visions where he knew what God had told other people, the ones that he's been given have been tough, that he hasn't been able to interpret the visions God has given him. So God sent an angel and said, this is what it means. So in chapter 11, he's telling a whole lot of stuff that's prophesied as to what will happen. And when we look back, we can go, whoa. I mean, it fits so well with so much stuff, you would almost have to go, did he really write it before these events happened? I mean, that's where a lot of higher critics go, because they go, there's no way that anybody could have prophesied with this sort of accuracy. Either that, but we know the text predates the events of that were prophesied. So it's just, it's mind-blowing that all of this stuff was in the text. Now, of course, it's written in Hebrew prophetic language and style, so it's not going to be like an American history book, and we shouldn't expect it to read like that. So that it will not be. So if you're going to say, well, it doesn't meet it is not as strict to meet all the standards of high academia, well, hello, this isn't a thesis, right? This is scripture, which includes lots of forms of rhetoric, okay? And it's not a boring thesis. Well, not that all theses are boring, but a lot of them are. Okay, so we finished with chapter 11, verse 1 last week, because it really made sense that verse 1 was really kind of the end of chapter 10, okay? So we'll begin with verse 2, chapter 11, okay? But we'll start, let's look at the last two paragraphs of the intro section. So the text starts with the Persian Empire, moves through Alexander the Great's rise and the division of his empire, focusing on the Ptolemaic and Seleucid conflicts. So we'll get into that. Okay, these struggles impact the Holy Land, or Judah, okay? Because remember, you had Israel, and then what happened? You kind of had a civil war, and most of the tribes up north, right? Israel, and then you had Judah and Benjamin kind of in the south, and then so that ends up becoming Judah, okay? And so the northern tribes of Israel, they're gone, right? They were captured by the Assyrians, dispersed among their population. They moved a bunch of people in. They interbred and became the Samaritans, and that's why the Jews hated them. Okay, because they were like half-breeds and have a little bit of Judaism, but a whole bunch of other stuff mixed together, right? So, but Judah remained intact. And after Persia takes over Babylon, okay, Ahasuerus or Xerxes says, okay, if you Jews want to go home, you can. And a lot of them do. But we know a lot of them don't, hence the book of Esther, right? So, yeah. So, this is where we find ourselves now. Daniel is part of the Persian Empire, though he's an old man. He's still part of kind of the advisors to the king. He's part of the magi, as it were, because he has proved so useful to the various kings. Nobody has wanted to get rid of him, though there have been many plots to discredit him and kick him out because, well, he's the wrong type of guy, but hasn't worked, okay? Last para intro. At the heart of this prophecy lies a warning and a promise. God's people will face severe trials, especially under a contemptible person. We've heard about this guy before, but we'll hear about him again, okay? Desecrating the temple. Yet through these hardships, the faithful will be refined and strengthened. Of course, being refined and strengthened is never fun, and it's never easy, okay? So, here we go. 11 verses 2 through 4, okay? And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia. So this is Daniel having, a vision, right? 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has risen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. Stop. Those of you who are history geeks, there's a few things that you could say. It sounds like this when you look at when this takes place in history, and then you kind of see some of the stuff that's happening. It sounds like, well, there's going to be, Greeks are involved, and somebody's going to be really mighty and powerful, and then what happens after that, right? A kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. What does that sound like? Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great, his son, huge empire, goes all the way, basically to the edge of India, Mediterranean basin, and what happens? Well, he dies as a young man. And what happens? Well, his empire is broken into 4 parts, and the leading generals have a part of the real estate, and they're basically running his empire after he dies. Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of know what happens, right? Well, you got more peas on the plate than I did. Right? Why do you have steak and I have whatever, right? And so, yeah. So all you have to do is look to human nature, and you know what's going to happen, and it will. Okay. So even if you were a good student of history, you can go, this sounds like, and you would be right. Because you could kind of know the era, and you know somebody super powerful is going to come along, and he will, and then, and what I just described to you, if you remember this from history or whatever, it fits, okay? So, a couple things to note from the Hebrew. So they use a vav, which is a letter, but it functions as an and so they're using a whole lot of this in the Hebrew text. But it does this to help kind of create kind of a swift kind of progression of the text. So the text kind of has this, staccato progression of movement to it, which kind of propels the reader along. So that's kind of what's happening in the text. Not so much in the English, because I think and doesn't seem to propel something along in English, but it seems to just kind of clutter it up, right? I mean, so even though it has a similar meaning, because vav can mean more than and, it doesn't function that way in English. So you can translate with all those intact, but it doesn't carry the momentum of the text, okay? So historical context, okay? The 3 more kings, okay, Cambyses II, Pseudo-Smyrtus, Darius the First, who followed Cyrus the Great. Xerxes the First, the 4th king, launched an unsuccessful invasion of Greece, defeats. Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, fulfilling the prophecy of the mighty king. After Alexander's death, his empire is divided among his 4 generals, right? So you have Macedonia, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Syria, and Lysimachus, which is in Asia Minor. The ones we will be concerned with are, the Ptolemy and Seleucus, because those two are, because what you have is Judah is in between those two. So when Egypt becomes a little more powerful, who's in the way? Judah, and they get run over, right? And then when Syria is a little more powerful, Israel gets run over. It's kind of like the 30 Years' War, if you're familiar with that in medieval European history, right? There were parts in Germany where it was just back and forth, right? And so now, the Catholics took over, the Protestants took over, and finally the people just said, I'll be whatever you want me to be. Because, you're supposed to be whatever because if you're the wrong religion, well, you're disloyal to the state. There wasn't this separation of church and state. But what ended up happening, of course, the 30 Years' War was just whatever the leader is, that's it. That'll settle it. And that's what was used to stop all the blood fighting. It wasn't the best solution, but it worked for a while, right? But what if I want to be this and my king is of that? Well, you have to move. Or you have to worship in secret. So, yeah. Okay, so that's a historical context. It's not good for Israel in many ways because they're in the middle. So, and when you're in the middle between two great empires, you're going to get squashed. Just is. Okay. Well, let's pick up a little bit more. Next section I'm calling North and South. North is the Seleucids, south is the Ptolemies, right? Egypt, Syria. So we know there's going to be a clash between the two. So, and it's ongoing. I wouldn't say it was as bad as our Civil War if you kind of look at that, but it gets nasty. And so, yeah. Verses 5 and 6, okay? Then the king of the south shall be strong, meaning the Ptolemy from Egypt. But one of his princes shall be stronger than he and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, and her attendants who fathered her and who supported her in those times. This stuff, it's written in prophetic language, has all that stuff, but if you're a C student in history and you read this and you see how it connects, you got to be on drugs to think that somehow, the connections are so profound. You have to go, wow. It should silence all the naysayers because it's just there are too many just to ignore and go, oh well, it's coincidence, right? Okay. So what does Daniel prophecy say about this relative strength of these kingdoms? Well, the southern kingdom is strong, but a prince will become stronger. Okay, so this refers to there's going to try to be an alliance by marriage, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? So when we read about Israel history in the Old Testament, right? Like Solomon was the worst because how many wives did he have and how many concubines? Right? It wasn't because he had some ridiculous, insatiable sexual appetite. It was because these were political agreements. You make agreements with everybody and his brother, hoping that, right? Oh, well, he won't attack us now because if he attacks us, his sister's going to get killed. Kings had these huge courts, and these were almost always political, okay? So what it ends up happening is, though, really the queen has no power because there's many queens, right? Who ends up really becoming the female power is really the king's mother because there's only one mom, but there's 100 queens. So Bathsheba, when she's the queen of David, is like, but when Solomon's king, whoa, she has lots of power, and she's sitting next to the king. And in fact, in many ways, she controls access to Solomon. So it's quite interesting to kind of see those dynamics, right? So because we think king and queen, we think, but we think of Britain, one king, one queen. We don't think of political marriages and all that sort of thing. So, Okay? But some of these political marriages are made, but they don't always work out. Okay? So the alliance in verse 6 refers to the marriage of Bernice. That's how they spell it. We spell our Bernice different, right? Daughter of Ptolemy to Antiochus. So that's his Antiochus II. We'll hear of Antiochus IV later on. He's the main dude who has the greatest effect on Israel history. Okay? So this marriage ended in tragedy with Bernice, her child, and her attendants murdered after Antiochus's death. Okay? The Hebrew text employs a series of cause and effect statements, creating a sense of unstoppable progression. So it's, there's some cool stuff going on. Describes the failed alliance in vivid personal terms. So in other words, it's taking the geopolitical stuff and it's making it personal, right? So it takes it from just the abstract to like, wow, this is what happened to, Bernice and her children. Okay. Well, what happens when somebody you sent to make an alliance is murdered? Maybe nothing, or it could be, you wait till I come and see you. So some of this becomes personal, and it's played out on the geopolitical stage. So it's interesting that Daniel's prophecy kind of gets into this depth. But this is prophecy from God, so let's hear it. Okay? Okay. And from a branch, we'll get to that. And from a branch from her roots, one shall arise in his place. He shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. Then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. Whew, it's hard to keep track of. There's a whole lot of fighting going on and plundering. There's going to be a little respite in there. Okay? His son shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and shall again carry the war as far as his fortress. So what this basically says, there's going to be war, and it's going to be one guy takes over and plunders the other guy, but then the other guy gets strong and beats up the, so it's basically what? Oh. Yeah. So basically it's okay, we're taking revenge. And so that's what kind of happens. So, when you run an empire or a state, you want to be powerful. And you want to have a presence where no one wants to mess with you. Like, oh, I'm not going to mess with this guy because he has a powerful army. But you don't really want to have to use your army too much because it weakens you, right? Well, you can capture territory, and then if that ends up enriching your empire, but then you have to incorporate these conquered peoples into your empire and make sure that they actually are part of the empire and help it and not undercut it. So, successful empires, usually they conquer territory over time, and it allows people to kind of become part of the empire and buy into the story. So, has anybody here watched The Chosen?
Yes.
I love it. I really do. They've done a few things that were wrong, but they've done a lot of stuff historically that is amazing that they brought into the text that I'm shocked that they did. And then they ran away. They did a lot of stuff in the story that is plausible and supports why Matthew writes the way he does and all this other stuff. But now I forgot the point I was making. So, So there's a centurion there named Gaius who's actually from the Germanic tribes. But see, he was brought in, and now he buys into the Roman Empire. And he's now loyal to the Roman Empire. See, so that's a successful empire. Okay, these empires, to a degree, they last a long time, and so they are successful in that regard. But sometimes, in their vision to make everybody kind of fit in and become part of your empire, well, you have to change what people think. You have to change you have to change a lot of stuff so that way they're part of the empire, not outsiders. We'll get into that later, maybe. Okay, but so a lot of this back and forth what's going to end up happening is that Israel, in a sense, will never have a chance to become really to buy into anybody's empire, because you have to rule for a few generations, but then you rule, and then bloop, the other guy comes in, and then bloop, the other guy comes in. So it doesn't quite happen for Israel, right? They just become mad that they keep getting stomped on and they're in somebody's way. Okay, we'll get to the cool part later if we get to it in time. Well, shall we press on? So we've heard of all this. Now the tale of retaliation, right? Oh, we just read that part. Okay. So, okay. Let's go to, so now I title this a Pyrrhic victory. We know what that means, right? Like you win, but the cost was so heavy, it's almost as if you lost. Oh, you militarily won, but wow, you don't have enough spoils to really counteract all the losses that were happened. And it's almost as if, yeah, we won, but if we could have prevented the war in the first place, right? Wouldn't we, can I say this without being charged as being a racist? But I mean, I think that was the North beating the South. It was a Pyrrhic victory. Sure, we won, but if we knew how much of a bloodletting it would be, I mean, we've lost more in the Civil War than all our other wars combined still, right? We would have, well, can we figure out some other way not to have to go to war and kill each other, right? I mean, the North would have eventually won because they had the factories. They were economically more powerful. There was no way the South would have won. I mean, in a long war, they didn't have the industrial infrastructure. They didn't have the manpower. I mean, it was like us with the Japanese in World War II. There was no way they would have won. The only way they would have won is if we just got tired and said, forget it. And that almost happened in the Civil War with the North. It was like in 1864, there were huge riots, right? So, okay, Pyrrhic victory. Just, we won, but wow, who cares? Okay, 11 through 13, okay? Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north. And he shall rise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. What does this sound like? This is big, huge battles. Lots of resources are involved. There's back and forth. But there will be a winner and there will be a loser, right? Okay, so the multitude, okay, that's Haman. That's also the sound for noise or tumult. So you can kind of see how that happens because a multitude is noisy, right? But so with that common, with kind of a common range of meanings there, it kind of conveys the chaos and the clamor of these massive armies going to war. So when you hear this word, you go, oh yeah, it's not just multitude, but you could hear in your mind the clash of armor, right? Because this word is chosen because it has that sound element to it, okay? But what emotion drives the king of the south to battle the north? Revenge, right? We're going to get back at you. So the king of the south is moved by rage, inciting emotional rather than strategic motivation for the battle. This refers to the Battle of Raphia in 217 BC, where Ptolemy of Egypt defeated Antiochus III of Syria. I don't personally know this, but I read it, and so I'm believing the historians here. So, I mean, history is my major, and I love history, but I don't know, I don't know the ancient Near East history that well that I could just off the top of my head tell you this, okay? So, but the king of the north regroups, raises an even larger army, and prepares for another attack. So, if you're going to poke the bear, you better make sure he's injured and doesn't get up or doesn't want to get up. If you poke the bear and you just make him mad, oh, that is bad. So, And that's what happened to us, and right? 9/11, poke the bear. Oh, it's bad. You know, there's a whole lot of political brouhaha about the plight of the Gazans. It's bad. But Hamas poked the bear. If it were us, I'm just saying, we wouldn't stop till they're gone. So we're a little hypocritical here. Well, because I'm saying, look at what we did to get at Al Qaeda, right? And it's like we weren't going to stop till, bin Laden's gone. And so, oh, well, it's us, that's different. So the quickest way to solve this is just to make sure Hamas doesn't exist anymore. And because if, as bad as it sounds, when Israel actually ran the Gaza Strip, there was more freedom, the people were more prosperous. It was actually better if you were a Palestinian living under Israel rule than under Palestinian rule. But you can't say that. Oh, man. But it was true, And if you got people who are alive then and now, there won't be a whole lot because the population, they have so many kids. And so most of the people have no idea what it was like living under Israel rule. Sure, there was abuse of power at times, but it was a lot better than having Hamas rule. So I remember when I was in the Middle East, somebody was talking to somebody, goes, oh yeah, you know what democracy is? And I said, well, what? One election, one time. And I went, oh yeah. Because once, right? That's like, yeah. Hamas gets in power, that's it, right? So so this is what happened. They poked the bear, but the bear just got angry and, licked his wounds, and now the bear's coming back for more. So let's continue, because this is all, we're going to see this big bloodletting between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, but another player is going to start entering the stage who will have a profound impact. But we will just hear hints of it, and it won't quite become that huge till later. Okay? Are we all right? Because this stuff is like just history. I mean, when I was putting together this lesson, I just went, oh man, no one's going to ever come back to Sunday school after this lesson. It's like, man, if I wanted this, I would go to university and become a history major. Okay, verses 14 through 20. I mean, I'm into it because I love history, but, Okay. In those times many shall rise against the king of the south, and the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. So the violent among your own people, that's... Okay? I guess we should say Judahites, right? Because Judea is really more the Greek form. Judah is, okay? Then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege works and take a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. But he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his hand. He shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and he shall bring terms of agreement and perform them. He shall give him the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand or be to his advantage. There's a whole lot of stuff happening here. We'll just ride the wave, and we'll dissect it in a moment. Okay? Afterward he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall capture many of them, but a commander shall put an end to his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fortresses of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and shall not be found. So on the main, it sounds like some dude's going to really become powerful, but he's going to be done in, and it sounds like he will, he won't even be able to kind of, in a sense, return home, because he'll die without fully realizing his dream. Okay? So who are the violent among your own people? He's referring to violent Jews or Israelites or Judahites. Okay? What major military success does the king of the north achieve? In verses 15 and 16, he captures a well-fortified city. That's Sidon. That's north of Israel proper, so it's near Tyre and Sidon. That's up north. I think today is in Lebanon, I believe. And gains control of the glorious land. So the glorious land is Israel. I mean, so remember, this is written from a Jewish perspective. Okay? What strategy does the king of the north employ in verse 17, and why does it fail? So it talked about the daughter of women. That's actually a way of saying somebody is really beautiful and is going to be married off for a political alliance, right? So he arranges a political marriage to gain influence over Egypt, but this fails. Daughter of women refers to Cleopatra the First, the daughter of Antiochus III, who was married to Ptolemy the Fifth of Egypt. So there will be a line of kind of Cleopatras that we'll know about. And what the most famous is Antony and Cleopatra, I think, which is at least in our in our collective history that kind of floats in our mind, because there's stories about them, and she's supposed to be super beautiful and all of that stuff. But that's during the time of Rome, right? So don't miss the language in verse 16, which emphasizes the unstoppable rise of a coming prince, Rome. So Rome is off on the side now, but Rome will become a bigger and bigger player. And eventually, the kingdom of the south, the Ptolemies, the kingdom of the north, the Seleucids, Rome's going to take over them all. Okay? But right now, right, Rome is just starting to kind of flex a few of its muscles. Okay? So the king of the north faces defeat by a commander. So we look back in history according to what I've read, because I don't know this guy. Okay, Lucius Cornelius Scipio dies while plundering temples in his own land. So, okay, I'll go with the historians on that one. Okay, so, but God is still working through stuff. What we're going to see is through all of this crazy stuff, every single person is doing what he wants in his own selfish interest, blah, 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 blah. And through all of this nonsense, God is working through this, and the Messiah will come, including some of the bad stuff that will happen. So a tyrant arises. This guy is important.
So I'm sitting here wondering, and maybe you just told me your statement. God gives Daniel this vision, and then sends an angel to interpret it. Why did God want us to know all this history? Is it leading up to the birth of Christ and how
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to make something up. I mean,
He had a reason.
I think, there are several. I mean, you could say the immediate purpose is what we can kind of see what's happening, right? But think about the greater purpose throughout time, right? Is to let other generations know that God is working through whatever mess is happening, and his will be done in the end. In the end, the Messiah comes and does what he needs to do to save us. In the end, Jesus will return, right? And do what he needs to do to save us. But in between, everybody's doing all of this crazy stuff. And God is working through those things, forcing no one to do anything. So, yeah. So, because every person is like doing, it's like no one's an automaton, right? So, yeah. So, let's see what happens, because this tyrant of which I speak is a big deal in Israelite history, and basically, he's the main non-Jewish character in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So if you read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, if you read it, you'll know who I'm talking about, okay? Because 1st and 2nd Maccabees really talks about the Israelite fight for independence, or the Judahite fight for independence, how they become independent and are basically an independent country for 100 years. And of course, Rome would have taken over them anyway, but Rome eventually takes over Judah because the Sadducees are bickering with the Pharisees, and the Sadducees ask the Romans to come in and deal with something. Well, that's pretty dumb. You ask a foreign mighty empire to come in and fight on your behalf. They never left. See? So, in a sense, if you're griping about the Romans, you have to blame yourself if you're Jewish. Well, I'm surprised the Sadducees weren't all beat up and done away with, but they were the wealthiest, and they had lots of temple power, so they still held lots of influence, even though the rank and file, it was mostly the Pharisees. Okay, tyrant arises. Okay, so I'm hoping these are not copyrighted, because I took a picture of a coin and then I told AI to draw it. I don't know, because I'm hoping it's legal, because I'm really worried about copyright stuff now, right? So I'm thinking this is not copyrighted. Okay, I don't know all the laws and stuff, but okay. So, a contemptible shadow fell over Palestine. It should be Judah, but oh well. Under Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Okay, that's where we get our word epiphany, the revelation of, and we'll get to that in a moment. History remembers this usurper as a ruthless villain who imposed Greek culture and outlawed Judaism's sacred practices. With cunning and ambition, he seized the Seleucid throne in 175 BC, outmaneuvering his rightful heir, nephew Demetrius I. I wanted to write this like it was like a movie intro, so just had a little fun. December of 167 BC marked a bloody chapter when Antiochus marched on Jerusalem, massacring thousands and defiling the temple's sanctity. It was bad, okay? Not satisfied with mere political gain and military glory, he claimed divinity, casting a pall over his reign. With Antiochus' death in 164 BC, leaving behind a legacy shrouded in darkness and defiance. So, yeah, we have to be honest, though, what he did to Judah, he did everywhere he ruled. He wanted everybody to be his version of Greek. He went into everybody's temple. If you weren't worshiping the right gods, he would go in and desecrate those temples, put a temple of Zeus or some other Greek god in there. He did this everywhere. So he didn't do this just, with the Jews. So now, the Jews, we think today, when we think of Jews, we think of bookish, intelligent people who wear glasses. But, the Jews that we know basically were shaped by 1,000 years of living in Europe, where they weren't allowed to, basically, they had to live in their own little neighborhoods called ghettos, and they had to eke out a living doing things that weren't allowed. So they would lend money, because lending money, you could do it, but you couldn't charge interest within Roman Catholicism. So wherever the flag of Rome flew, who's going to lend money if you can't earn interest? You're going to take risk, but I can't, right? So Jews kind of filled in that niche, and everybody hated them for it, but they were necessary. So they kind of they had this reputation for being money and smart, and they really were, and bookish. But before all of that, before they were shaped by, hundreds and hundreds of years of that culture, Jews were the thugs that you want a mercenary? Go talk to a Jew. They were a hard scrabble, fighting type of people, and it was hard to control them in an empire, because you squash them, but underneath, there's always this bubbling up, like, there might be a big outbreak, and I'm going to have to go in and squash it a second time. And so that's the reason why the Assyrians basically deported the entire northern kingdom and just scattered them to the four winds, because they wanted to basically destroy their ability to be that way. But that didn't happen to the south. That south remained intact, through whom the Messiah came. So despite all that, God kept an intact people, and the Messiah was born. Okay? But this tyrant, he had to deal with this same sort of thing, the same thing that Rome was worried about, that Pilate was worried about. Oh man, if there's this giant uprising, my political career is over, right? That was the big worry of everyone who had to oversee Judah, and that was why Pilate does what he did. Okay, and of course, Pilate still ends up being exiled in some weird farthern region of Rome. So he, all his pragmatism didn't benefit him, because he basically ends up being demoted and dies in some outpost in the far reaches of Rome. And he didn't progress up the ladder like he wanted, so. But anyway. So here we go. Let's verse 21 through 24. Okay. You say, more than I wanted to know, Pastor. In his palace shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. In other words, somebody's going to rule, but he's not supposed to be the ruler. That's not that weird in human history, is it? No. He's related. He has a claim, but not the rightful claim. It's more like, oh, he's third in line or something like that, right? He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. So he's like a bright burning flame. So he does a whole lot of stuff and has the momentum, and he's bribing people from the plunder that he does have, and so, he buys his way. But if you buy people's loyalty, it could just as easily be, it's not real loyalty, right? So, it's not the longest lasting, okay? So what tact is this? Is Antiochus the Fourth, okay? So, okay, what does he use? He acts deceitfully, builds alliances only to break them, and uses small but a loyal group to consolidate power. That's what all the text was saying there, right? So how does verse 24 characterize his rule compared to his predecessors? He's more ruthless, and he's very smart in how he uses his plunder. So he's using it to benefit, to help grow his empire, his ability to rule. So kind of like Jeff Bezos in Amazon. He started out small, and for years he never even made a profit. Everything that he made, he reinvested back into his company. And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, okay, he did some stuff that he squashed little guys too. So it wasn't all just hard work and everything, but it was both, right? And now, right, Amazon is like Walmart is like the Tomalees and the Seleucids are Walmart and Amazon, right? And that's kind of the situation. So Antiochus, he builds his power base. He knows how to influence people and get things done, okay? And he's unscrupulous. So I guess I'll get political because I watched both conventions. One convention actually had solutions and talked about. The other one talked about nothing but just said, oh, but it's offering hope and this is what we're going to do. But mentioned nothing about, well, how are we going to do this? Or why are we in the mess we're in? None of that, right? But I think it's effective because I'm watching, I'm like, wow. It's only when I actually thought about some of the speeches, I'm like, man, that was a good speech. And then I thought about the content, I went, that's actually really deceptive. Like, we want to help the working man. Hey, I'm all for that, yeah. It's like, yeah, but you haven't helped them so far, right? Your policies are destroying the working man. So Antiochus is like that, okay? And Take this in the right way, please. What I mean is that he's really good at taking stuff and spinning it his way so he gets the results he wants. Yeah, okay. So you had to go there. but and if you're not smart, you get caught up in. So he's very effective, and once you have the momentum, it's hard to go against the momentum, right? Everyone says, oh, well, I would. No, you wouldn't. You'd be like everybody else. You'd ride the wave and you'd be a clone. That's 98% of the people, right? Because you're caught up in something, and so you may be carried away by it, or you might now be afraid, and you go, well, I'll just hunker down in, right? Because if I do something, you're going to get squashed, and that's true. Only things usually happen like if everyone rose at the same time in Nazi Germany, they wouldn't have existed, right? But if it's only one or two people, you're gone. So they existed like they did till the very end because, well, fear is very powerful. Okay, same with Stalin, right? Stalin dies, and then all the people around him are cheering, and then he gets back up, and all the people are. And they're scared and they start begging for forgiveness. Just because fear is that powerful, okay? So Antiochus IV operates on fear, okay? And he intimidates. So unless you have somebody exceptional, it usually works, Okay? Verses 25 through 28. Let's see, what was that? I don't know. Is that accurate?
It is, yes.
Okay, good. Because last time it was the other clock where last week I was 5 minutes late. It was like, yeah, and I thought, oh, we still have 5 minutes. And it was, yeah. Okay. 25 through 28, okay? So, and he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plot shall be devised against him. Get that, eh? Wow. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. So in other words, Antiochus is not below fighting dirty. Okay? And as for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall work his will, and return to his own land. Okay. So you can kind of see there's going to be negotiations, but both are liars. So, I'll listen, I'll follow it until it's no longer convenient or no longer in my best interest. Then, and that is often the case even today, right? With agreements. So, I mean, we do it as America, right? So, because we often think that we don't. So I'll give you a good example. So, when basically Russia de-armed and became the Soviet Union broke apart and said, okay, and the agreement was made at the time, well, we're not going to expand NATO because you're not the great empire anymore. We're gonna recognize your sovereignty and we're not going to encroach on you. What has happened? NATO kept expanding, and there are even talks of bringing Ukraine into NATO. Now, I'm not saying that Putin was justified to invade Ukraine, but what I'm saying is it should have been obvious that would happen when we keep expanding NATO right to the border of Russia. Hello? It doesn't take rocket science. So we broke our own agreement with Russia that we wouldn't do this. And now we're going bankrupt supporting a country to fight Russia, and we probably would have never had to do that if we hadn't expanded NATO as we did. So that's my thinking, okay? So, but I mean, you know, history is history and you can't undo it. So it's a messed up situation, but we kind of fed into it without honoring our word. So we're guilty too, okay? So what tactics has Antiochus used to gain advantage? He uses deceit and strategic alliances, pretending to support Ptolemy VI while plotting his downfall. Oh, wow, he had his own CIA. Oh boy, I'm going to be in jail now. Okay. What is the outcome of Antiochus' fourth campaign in Egypt? He gains control, but the victory is unstable because of ongoing deception and political complexity. Okay. What does Antiochus do after his campaign against Egypt? According to verse 28, Antiochus returns to his land with great wealth, but sets his heart against the Holy Covenant, referring to his intentions against the Israelites, the Judahites, and Jerusalem. That's next week. I wanted to get into it today, but that's a whole lesson. And that's a whole Maccabean rebellion. And that requires a whole lesson to itself, okay? Okay, this passage employs ironic contrasts, great armies that cannot stand, kings plotting evil while dying together, victories that lead to spiritual defeat. This structure underscores the futility of human schemes against God's plans. We'll see that later. Right now, it just looks like all this human scheming is doing nothing but bringing destruction and ruin, and yes, it is, right? So that's where we are. Next week's going to be a lot of history. Please don't flee and run away. It's in the text, okay? But I think through all of this, we'll kind of learn how God is working through stuff, which means he's also working today through stuff, though we cannot see or understand how. And in a sense, by enabling us to look back, we can go, he was really... See, he foretold what would happen. He didn't actually cause this. Everybody's individuals, right? Selfishness and greed caused all this, right? So, okay. Are we good? So next week, come back. We're going to stand the horse. We'll kind of finish this. I think we might be able to get all the way through the end of chapter 12, but there's going to be a good chunk about what's the deal with Antiochus, what did he do to Israel, Judah, what happened to him, and then, of course, pretty much after that, Rome gets bigger and bigger and bigger and whatnot. And we kind of know that because that eventually leads us to the time of Jesus. And so when Jesus is born, Rome has been ruling Israel, Judah, for maybe 30-something years when he's born. So it wasn't that long ago, because I think it was like 69 BC or something. Oh, well, then it was longer than that. Okay. But I mean, but there was still kind of this vision of that we can become independent once more. And that's, in a sense, the messianic drive in Jesus' day. So, okay. Are we good? I know this is insane stuff. But we'll bring it all together. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, so much was going on in the book of Daniel, but this was all prophesied. That's the part that's so hard to wrap our head around. But if we just try not to wrap our head around and go, well, you're God, then everything becomes easy. Let us recognize that you are God and be content with that, knowing that you are still running things in your own way, though everybody is doing whatever he wants according to his best interests. But you are working through those things for our eternal good. This you say, this we know through the life of Jesus. And this we ask, that we have such faith to believe this all our days. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.